I think I might call this one like something like Lazy in Space. I think that's a good name for this Star Wars video. Let's talk about Star Wars for a second. All right. So I've been catching up. For a while, I wasn't watching Star Wars. I just wasn't. I wasn't fucking into it. I was just kind of done. Right? This is happening for two reasons. One, the shows that currently exist don't really cater to my particular things in Star Wars. I'm a Jedi jockey for the most part. I'm into my Force lore. I'm not saying I don't come to Star Wars for other things, right? But those are the main things. I mean, I like your Mandalorians and stuff, you know what I mean? But a good Jedi every now and then keeps me going, in Star Wars. I'm not saying I don't find other groups of people fascinating, okay? But at the end of the day, I want to see lightsabers go... Right? So, yeah. But not only that, right? I like certain kinds of plots in Star Wars. Like, I like a lot of your old Western shit. In space. You know? And I need other planets to do that on besides for fucking Tatooine all the time, right? So, like, I want to see, a Jedi from the Civil War coming in to bring peace and order to a long forgotten town. Yeehaw. That's the kind of story I want to see, and they don't do that a whole lot. Not really, what I'm looking for in Star Wars doesn't happen very often. So, I haven't been watching it. That's what happens. You don't cater to your audience long enough, I guess. Or a piece of your audience long enough, that piece can fall off. Now, I'm a big Star Wars fan. It's, like, important to my fucking identity, right? This is, like, a cultural touchstone and shit. Like, I watch Star Wars. That's part... People come to ask me about Star Wars-related things. Which means that inevitably, at some point, I was going to have to get caught up on Star Wars, whether I was into what they were currently doing or not. Okay? That being said, I've recently watched... the first episode of The Mandalorian and the new season of The Bad Batch. Both Dave Filoni projects, which means that they're more or less both George Lucas approved. Okay? Insofar as George Lucas wants to approve anything after he finished his movies and decided, fuck these guys, I'm going to give it to Disney. So Filoni and Favreau are kind of the key keepers when it comes to deciding what is and is not Star Wars right now, right? I think all of us as fans, more or less, thought that the sequel trilogy was a mess. Now, you fall into two camps with that. You either think Last Jedi was great, and that the third movie ruined it, or you think Last Jedi was abysmal, right? And the third movie failed to save it. Now, as uninterested as I am in this debate over how the sequels fucked the pig, right? Allow me to throw my hand into the ring in the sense that all of these movies suck because they don't have a fucking plan. Nobody sat down and came up with what the story arc was going to be for this multi-million-dollar movie franchise. And it is a movie franchise, not a Disney Plus franchise, okay? I want to see Star Wars movies. There is a magic in 1, 2, 3. I want to see that. I want to see that on the silver fucking screen. The last Star Wars movie I enjoyed was Solo: A Star Wars Story. And that wasn't everybody's favorite fucking film. But it had a lot of what I'm looking for in Star Wars. An old Western heist. It was in space. We had charismatic characters. It was both fresh and old-timey at the same time. It had a lot of the Flash Gordon colors, you know what I mean? It had a lot of the things that I'm looking for in a Star Wars movie. There's even a lightsaber in it towards the end. Darth Maul shows up. Spoilers for an old movie now. So, I enjoyed Solo, Star Wars stories. I didn't like Rogue One. And I know that this is one of my more controversial opinions. When I tell people, Rogue One is boring and pointless. We already know that they got the Death Star plans. It's the beginning of A New Hope, okay? We already know that they got the fucking Death Star plans. We know that. We know that they got that, okay? They succeed. Spoilers for the fucking movie. The moment you find out that this movie is about getting the Death Star plan, it becomes absolutely fucking pointless. The only thing that's left is giving a shit about these characters. The problem is that they kill off all the fucking characters. So if you're never going to see these characters again, I'll get to Andor in a second. If you're never going to see these characters again, alright, and you don't give a shit about getting the Death Star plans because you know they succeed, then why the fuck do you care about Rogue One? Right? You don't. You don't care about Rogue One. So they stopped making fucking Star Wars movies, even though people loved Rogue One. Whatever. Okay. Cool, whatever. So, I dropped off of Star Wars eventually. Now, before I dropped off of Star Wars, I want to preface it the fact that I'd seen all of The Mandalorian 1 and 2, right? I had seen the Book of Boba Fett, which was the last Star Wars thing that I saw before I dropped off, and I saw the miniseries that they did, Tales of the Jedi, and I saw season 1 of The Bad Batch. Okay, so I'm theoretically caught up on all of the Star Wars things. I even watched the little series that they made with all the Japanese animators where they made a bunch of really cool Star Wars shorts. I watched all that. I have seen the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli Grogu short. Okay, if they made a new holiday special, I've probably seen it. The only thing I don't watch is that fucking Lego shit. Okay, so I've seen all the Star Wars things. Now I can give my opinion on them. My precious opinion, the golden ore that you come to me for. Let's see. I'm sorry if I'm bringing manic energy. I just woke up. Anyway, I gotta bring that crackhead energy to Star Wars sometimes. It needs that enthusiasm. It demands it. Okay. So, what do I think of Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1? It's good. Unfortunately, The Mandalorian took a piss in my post-toasties, and I need to talk about this for a second. I found out recently in an interview that Jon Favreau said that apparently 2 years passed between Season 2 and the part of the Book of Boba Fett where they get back together. Interesting. That's weird. Because it recontextualizes everything. Especially what Luke does. Especially what Luke Skywalker does. In the story as seen, it seems like he kind of gives up on Grogu. It's like, this kid doesn't really want to be a Jedi, I guess. Whatever. You know what I mean? Or, kid, you gotta make a choice between me, this guy that you've spent like maybe a week with, and this guy who you spent almost a year with defending you, right? It's not as cut and dry if it's been 2 fucking years, right? He's been trying with this kid. If the last bit of training we see from Grogu is his last week of training, Grogu is a very unimpressive student. He's barely using the Force. He's barely paying attention. Luke has to fucking shoot him with a droid to get him to hop, right? Like, Grogu becomes kind of a fucking delinquent student if this has been 2 years of training. This is the result of 2 years of training. Jesus Christ. Right? And so you got the Mandalorian over here still pining for fucking Grogu, bringing them little metal shirts and shit. And you have Grogu who's like, oh, I miss my Mandalorian friend with his mind or whatever. And fucking, Luke is not an unsympathetic character in this instance. He's like, well, I'm not going to keep this father and son separated. I hated things that kept me and my dad separated, like old Palpatine. I'm not going to be Palpatine and keep this dad, this big suit-wearing, helmet-wearing, lightsaber-wielding father from his little green boy, right? Luke knows all of those feelings. So, he's like, hey, kid, make your choice. You want to be with me? You want to be with him? Go to who you need to be with, right? And the thing is, about that, too, is Luke's right in this instance. If he spent 2 years on it and made no progress, he is right because he's like, what's a short time to you is a lifetime to us. Grogu might feel like he's only been there a couple of weeks, right? But he's been there for 2 years! 2 fucking years, right? So Luke's like, hey, my whole ass Jedi temple is built now. It wasn't when you got here, right? Like, I'm sorry, but make your choice. And so Luke comes off a lot more sympathetic in that instance. Another aspect of that, too, is if Grogu has improved drastically at the Force, which seems to be a direction that they're going with, that Grogu is going to not only be more powerful in the Force, but also be able to talk soon, right? Well, if those things are going to happen, there being a 2-year time skip makes a lot more sense, because he wasn't really even fucking close before. He threw some dudes around a room and he passed out. He made little sounds, right? It having been 2 years and him having his memories unlocked and all that shit means that him talking seems a lot more close at hand now. Right? That extra context matters, right? Also, Din Djarin waited 2 years to explain to the Forge Master that he had taken off of his helmet. Or it took him 2 years to find the other Mandalorians. That's a big time spent alone. No wonder that Darksaber was getting so heavy. Speaking of which, how many Mandalorians has the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, had to fight for the Darksaber in these intervening 2 years while the Darksaber is getting gradually more and more heavy? Right? How many times has the Darksaber almost killed him? 2 years is a long time to be wielding a heavy, unwieldy, shitty sword, right? That everybody wants to kill you for and to not give it up. It's like some fucking Afro Samurai #1 headband bullshit. Like, no wonder he's fucking done. You know, when the one Vizsla guy is like, we've ancestrally wielded the Darksaber, huh? And tries to fight him, he's just like, yeah, fuck you. And he beats him instantaneously because he's used to this shit. Of course that guy's not going to beat him against the Darksaber now. Presumably a bunch of Mandalorians have challenged him for it. Either that or he's been facing such dangerous odds with such a shitty weapon, right, this whole time, that, you know, there's just no way you could beat him having it because he's gotten used to it. Right? All of this makes a lot more sense in the context that it's been 2 years. But then, if that's the case, if it's been 6 months to 2 years, a long time, right? Either way, then you give us a little fucking sign that says it's been 2 years. You show us, you flash us up a little thingamajig that says it's been 2 years. You know? Right? Don't you? Don't you give us this fucking sign? You're like, hey, it's been a while. It's been 6 months, or it's been 2 years, or whatever. Because that's the Favreau quote, is that it's been between those time periods. That's a big fucking deal. So, in the Book of Boba Fett, right, when they show us Grogu, they should show Grogu being handed off to Luke, right? And then say, 2 years later, right? Because that's important fucking information to have. You know, I don't know what else to say. It burns my biscuit slightly. You know, also, I guess we'll talk about that for a second. Let's talk about The Mandalorian Season 2.5, a.k.a. The Book of Boba Fett. Put that series, I swear to God, put that series in the middle of Season 2 and 3. And just, you know, fucking call it what it is, right? Call it Mandalorian Season 2.5, The Book of Boba Fett. I guess the idea is that they want to continue the Book of Boba Fett, right? Okay, as like its own thing, fine. But the problem is that if you're going to have required information from The Mandalorian in that series, it sort of just needs to shit or get off the pot. Either that, or they need to compress the information having to do with The Mandalorian, right? Into its own episode that goes in between seasons 2.5. A supercut of all the Mandalorian-related shit that's necessary for you to view, right? In between Season 2 and Season 3. Right? Am I crazy here? I mean, that's what needs to happen. Okay. I wasn't initially very mad about it, because I watched the Book of Boba Fett, so I had that critical information, but the more I've thought about it, the shittier it is. Alright. So, The Mandalorian, which is the flagship I like watching it show right now, has disappointed me with the lack of it's 2 years later, and the lack of being honest about the importance of the Book of Boba Fett. Okie doke. Maybe other shows can save this. Let's talk about, I don't know, The Bad Batch. I like the A-Team. I like Mr. T. Right? Theoretically, I like this show. Theoretically, this show has a bunch of components in it that I like. It's Clone Wars related. You know what I mean? It's got clones. Let's talk about the power structure of the Empire. But I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of done with this time period. Palpatine ruled for 20 years. In that time, you know what Vader did? He killed a bunch of Jedi and choked a bunch of generals. That's what he fucking did. He was a stone cold pimp the whole fucking time. You know what the Inquisitors did? Choked some motherfuckers, killed some younglings. That's what they did the whole time. So much so that there weren't any Jedis to show up and help Luke in the final conflict with the Emperor. No Grungy, no Cal Kestis. All of them either left the galaxy, right, or died. They left the galaxy or they fucking died. That's what happens. We already know what the fuck happens in that time period. Clone troopers are replaced with stormtroopers, many of which die, some of which don't. Okay? Some live on the street or in little encampments or whatever. We've seen what happened to the clones we give a shit about in Star Wars Rebels. So what the fuck is the point of watching The Bad Batch? There isn't any point. You have to give a shit about these characters, and they're all the same guy doing different voices. And we know what happens to these people. They're either going to leave the galaxy, A, die, B, or C, settle down somewhere. And since, we always want the opportunity to use these guys later, they're going to settle down somewhere. They're eventually going to find a safe place to hunker down, at least some of them, right? Especially Omega, because I doubt Star Wars has the balls to give you a child main character that they're going to kill. Star Wars does kill children occasionally, what with the whole, Anakin Skywalker thing. But I think that they're going to keep that genie in the bottle. I don't think that we're going to get child murder anytime soon again in Star Wars. Which means that Omega is going to be fine. Their quest to find a place for her to be, she's going to be fine. And I bet, 10 out of 10, she's going to develop force powers, right? That's going to be the secret of what Omega's peculiarity is that she's force sensitive. She has really good intuition. She can kind of tell, the direction things are going. She has a light bow that's very reminiscent of a lightsaber. She was good in the Zepho tomb, which is related to some force shit. She's fucking force sensitive. So they're going to give her to a Jedi eventually, right? Or something. So maybe she's part of the same project, that they wanted Grogu for. I don't know. But 9 out of 10 times, a YouTube video is going to be able to explain what happens in these shows because you already know what happens. You already understand that the clones and the Jedi go kaput, right? So that the monochromatic empire can reach across the universe. Right? You already know. So the Bad Batch, in spite of being so dun 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 dun, you already know what happens. And there's no point watching a show that you don't know what happens. You know what I like about The Mandalorian? It takes place in a period of time that I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about the 30 fucking years that took place between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. Which at this point, the Filoniverse doesn't even take place in that, or they're going to send all of its titular characters to the universe next door so that they don't have to worry about the fucking canonicity of the sequels. I would just say that, the fucking Jedi have set up shop in the other universe and just didn't know about the whole Empire business because it only took 20 years and it was a blip to them. And, the Star Wars is just a complete reset that other galaxy so that you can just have all of the Star Wars things that are fun. You know what I mean? Just fucking treat it as your own little toy box, dude. I don't give a shit. So, fucking, they're just not showing me what I want to see in Star Wars. That's really all it is. You know what I mean? And that fresh newness with The Mandalorian, unfortunately, got bogged down with shitty marketing. Now, is that going to be a black spot on Season 3 forever? Not necessarily. I've enjoyed this first episode of Season 3. I'm looking forward to see where it goes. I just got back into Star Wars. I just watched Season 2 of The Bad Batch, to get caught up, whatever. Now, a lot of people are going to mention in the comment section, what about Andor? Right? I already shared my thoughts on that, why I'm not interested, because it's a Rogue One property, but I'll expound a little bit. When the main virtues that somebody has to say about something is that it's pretty, and that it's slow, so you prove to yourself that you have an attention span by watching it, I'm automatically like, no. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the 70s. I like seeing characters walk towards things. I like seeing montages. I like seeing non sequiturs. I like character development. I like all of the things that the 70s cinema had to offer, more or less, right? I've seen Taxi Driver. I've seen that version of The Shining that everybody raves about. I understand. I'm just saying, right? I've seen Star Wars. I'm just saying, like, I understand that people are like, oh, Andor, it's so 1970s. It's so Star Wars, but it's not. But it's, that's not a kind of contemplation something doesn't need to be slow to be good for me, okay? I don't need a test to prove that I have an attention span. Moreover, right, if the only thing you can say about it is that it shows the real insidiousness of tyranny, or the real insidious, like the way that the Empire works. You know how the Empire works? Take a look out your fucking window and look at America, and you'll understand how the Empire works. Seriously. Like, I see tyranny in the world all the fucking time. I don't need Star Wars to explain how tyranny works to me. You know what I mean? The floor is electric so that the slaves can't escape, so they don't even try to. What? You condition a people to follow your orders based off of institutionalized suckitude, and then they don't question it because it's the norm? What a meta commentary. I mean, maybe there's some people who need these things spelled out for them in the fucking back, but it's not me, right? And I know this fucker's gonna die, so it's not gonna get wrapped up in this character. You might say, well, wait, every character dies, and it's like, yeah, every character dies, but usually not when you're first introduced to them. You have time to get attached to them and wonder how their story might end before they die, right? Din Djarin could become an old man on Navarro telling his stories to Grogu and co, right? Or he could go to the other galaxy and become the king of the Mandalorian people with little baby Grogu in tow, and him and the Mandalorians reform in this new planet, and he is the new Mandalore, right? So he's like Conan the Barbarian. He's this warrior king. Or, right, he could die in a shootout. You know, him and Grogu are trying to make something of themselves in this new galaxy, and this new galaxy is just too rough and tumble for them. I have no idea what happens to that character. So I'm invested. And in the future, when I rewatch, I'll always be like, oh, man, it sucks that this or that happens. Or it's, he's like, hopefully someday, kid, we can be somewhere safe, and, you know, it'll just be you and me, right? And then I'll know whether or not that happens, and it'll give me a different type of investment in the story. But when I initially meet a character, I need to not know what's going to happen to them. You know, and in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, since they die in the first material that they're introduced to me in, I don't care about them. And since their first mission is something that I already know how it succeeds or doesn't, I don't care about it. There was never any mystery for me to get attached to. So I don't give a shit. Right? So Andor is just not going to be my thing. Also, I know there's no Jedi in it. I need at least one Jedi. I need a Jedi occasionally in order for me to give a fuck. I'm sorry. I'm a lightsaber jockey. I don't mean to be, but I am. Don't judge me. But yeah, I'm hoping Star Wars gets its act together soon. Then there's the Ahsoka show. Listen, I like Dave Filoni's OC as much as everybody else. If Dave Filoni started off his Star Wars career by telling us, I have an orange cat girl OC that I think you guys are going to love, I would have been like, fuck off, right? Go back to DeviantArt. But no, you know what? I like Dave Filoni's DeviantArt Catgirl OC Ahsoka Tano. She should be dead by now, or sitting on a rock somewhere, or whatever, because she's not in the events of the sequel trilogy, right? And if we're ignoring that the sequel trilogy isn't gonna, if that doesn't happen now, then I'd rather these be movies. I'd rather this be an Ahsoka trilogy of films. I know Dave Filoni's never directed a movie, not really. I mean, unless you count that fusion of 3 episodes of the Star Wars thing, right? But like Favreau has definitely overseen the creation of movies with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Ahsoka series should just be 3 movies, okay? 3 films. They can even make it using their TV stuff. I just want to sit down and watch a Star Wars movie. Ahsoka should not take up an entire fucking series. Also, it's the continuation of Star Wars Rebels. I liked Star Wars Rebels. Why not just continue it in its own art style? It's a continuation of a show I liked as a different show that I'm not guaranteed to like, because it has a completely different visual style and feel. So, yeah, basically, I'm excited for Fallen Order 2. Even though I'm sick of this time period. I want to go into the 30 years in between films, between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and then I want to never do the sequel trilogy, to either skip the events of the sequel trilogy altogether, or to just go to that new galaxy that Dave Filoni's talking about, or whatever we're going to do. I want to be there. I want to be in a future that is uncertain to me. Will these characters live? Will these characters die? I am sick to death of sidequels. I want actual sequels to fucking Star Wars. And I want Star Wars movies. I want movies. I want the fucking movies to happen, okay? And, side note, I want a series that is a Jedi. You know that the Jedi served as Interpol? Right? That's their basic job, is to go between planets and, like, solve problems and shit. Hunt down international or intergalactic criminals. Give me that show. Give me Walker, Texas Ranger, the Star Wars show. Right? Like, I want that series. Give me that fucking series. Set in the High Republic or whatever. That intervening 200 years before the fucking prequel era, right? When the Sith are scarce, but the Jedi are still on their shit, right? Set in the High Republic. And give me a lone Jedi, who's been out in the Outer Rim a little too long. He's seen some things. And this Jedi is going to bring justice to an unjust galaxy. Right? Give me that. Give me that. That's what I want. I will tune in for that fucking show every week. An old Jedi going around the galaxy solving problems, right? They did that shit for 100,000 years. There's 100,000 years of material there, and you might say, well, we know how that turned out. Dr. Make It Stuff, we know how that turned out. We know that they did protect the Republic. The Republic didn't collapse for 100,000 years. Yeah, we do know that, but on a micro scale, we don't know planet Mithril, in the Faholan system. There's all sorts of stories you could do, There's all sorts of stories you could do. But again, my Star Wars series is not happening. The Star Wars series I can really bite my teeth into is not happening. Maybe the Ahsoka show will be it. Maybe. I mean, it's in the part of the timeline that I'm the most interested in, which is now, essentially, right? The Mandalorian timeline. So maybe it'll be good. Yeah. I just want Star Wars to be something I can be unabashedly interested in. Again. This has been Dr. Make It Stuff, signing out. Ba-dum ba-ba-dum ba-ba-dum dum 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 ba-ba-bum ba-ba-bum bum bum ba-ba-bum ba-ba-bum wah 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 bum 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 a diddle-oo a diddle-oo ba-da-bum ba-da-bum bum bum ba-da-bum ba-da-ba-da-ba-dum ba-ba-dum ba-ba-dum bum bum ba-ba-bum ba-ba-da-bum bum 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 ba-da-ba-da-da-dum bum 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 ba 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 bum ba 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 bum bum ba-da-dum ba-da-da-dum bum bum ba-da-dum ba-da-da-dum ba-da-da-dum ba-da-dum ba-dum ba-da-da-dum ba-dum dum 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 ba 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 bum 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 ba bum bum ba bum ba da 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 ba 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 da da dum da ba da ba ba da ba 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 da ba da Ba-bum, bum-ba-dum-bum. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-dum. Ba-da-dum, da-dum, bum-ba-dum. Bum ba 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 Ba-bum, Bum bum ba-dum, ba-da-ba-dum, bum 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 bum, ba-da-ba-ba-dum bum, bum ba-dum, bum ba-dum, ba-da-ba-dum bum 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 bum, ba-da-ba-ba-dum bum. Ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-dum, ba-ba-ba-dum, 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-dum, ba-ba-ba-dum, 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 da-da-da-da-da, do-hey-oh-dum, ha-dum, ba-ba-ba-dum, 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 ba-ba-da-da-da, oh-hey-oh, ba-da-hey-ho, hum-be-ho. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars and some more Star Wars music. Star Wars, yeah, Star Wars. It has light swords, fucking man. I've wasted my life on something stupid, but it is so cool because it has cowboys and spacemen and laser swords.